Today and for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be looking together at some of life's greatest questions. Like, where did I come from? Why am I here? And where am I going? Nine-year-old Joey came in and tapped his dad on the shoulder one evening and said, "Dad, where did I come from?" Dad panicked. Took a deep breath, and for the next 30 minutes proceeded to tell him the whole story. You know, facts of life, birds and the bees, just how this whole marvel of creation, how procreation, human birth takes place. And finally finished and said, "So does that answer your question?" And Joey says, "Well, yeah, I guess, but Billy said he was from Toledo, and I was just wondering where I came from." For those of you who have heard me share that before, thank you for laughing again. Whether curious about the mystery and marvel of human birth or just wanting to know where we lived before we lived here, the question of where did I come from is one of the first great questions of life arising from our human experience. And I think at some level, at the core of the question of where did I come from is not just a scientific question. It's not just a philosophical question. It's not just a religious question. But at the core, I believe, is a question of what is my identity? Because somehow we understand that my identity is wrapped up in my history, at least in some form. And it may simply be, this friend of mine said he was from Toledo, and I don't have a story. I don't know where I'm from. And somehow the fact that he's from somewhere besides here makes it seem like he's a little more important than I am. And if I have somewhere that I can say I'm from, then maybe that can contribute to my sense of identity. Well, give Joey a few more years, and suddenly something from Dad's premature lecture on the facts of life begins to echo around the edges of his memory, and eventually he really does want to know, where did I come from? And it's not just an identity question. It's trying to understand how all of this works. It is a question about origin. We have a story in our own family. You say no, that we don't tell it? Oh, he's doing like this. Okay, so. And again, I may have told this before. I'm 53, and sometimes I forget what I said. As long as you tell the truth, you don't have to worry, right? And this is true. Noah is our youngest, and for some strange reason, he was a little bit older in life before he got the full picture of the origin, that story, lecture, whatever. He got bits and pieces from his older siblings, but we will long remember the day that we were all in the North Lodge of Camp Swatara. I won't go into the circumstances of just why, but I do remember it was 2007. So if I do the math right, Noah would have been 10 at that time. And some comment was made, and Noah, you'll understand this later. And it was, he finally put his foot down and said, "I'm tired of having to wait till later to understand these things." So he said, "I want to know now." And Reba said, "Well, right now, with your sisters and brother around, I want to know now." So what ensued was, and it's been embellished a little bit perhaps, but everybody kind of watching while Reba whispers something in his ear and watches his reaction, and then whispers a little bit more. And at one time, somewhere in this whole process, came the comment, "You did that 4 times?" To which I think Reba said, yes, see how much we love you. But I'm not sure that that's as good as what came out a few minutes later. I had left, I don't know, maybe I went into the bathroom. Somehow I was out of the room for a little part of this conversation. But Noah was justified, I think, in asking it. But the question itself in this context was, does Dad know? And he said so short as he meant, does Dad know that I know now? But boy, in that context. But the question of where did I come from? Even the origin part of that question goes back a lot further and is far more important than just how the biology works. Although it is related to the biology because the biology is marvelous. The biology, I don't believe, could have ever happened by time and chance. It's not just a matter of stepping back and looking at the vastness of space through a telescope, but looking through the microscope and seeing how, in the King James language, how fearfully and wonderfully made we are.
Amen.
How God created us so complex. You saw that video and the image going into the cells and to the atoms within our body and seeing how marvelous and intricately we are made. And how God gave us the capacity to be co-creators with Him in the marvelous act of procreating and how new life comes into the world. It is marvelous. It is amazing. And any question of where did I come from, any question of our identity has to be built upon the foundation of the origin of life, of our origin, that you were created by the God who made all things, and you were created in His image. And that's the only foundation for a true identity that God desires for us to have. We've looked at the scriptures, at some of the many scriptures that talk about this. And that's where we place our faith and trust, but it's not a faith and trust that we have to leave our brain outside the doors of the church.
Amen.
All you have to do is watch the video that we've watched. All you have to do is have eyes open to the marvels of the world around you. I'm not going to get into an argument about just how God chose to do that. The language of Scripture is the language of 6 days, and I'm not going to let that become an issue between us. God could have done that in 6 days if He wanted to. It could have been 6 literal 24-hour days. That's a small thing to God. But if God chose to do it differently and to eventually reveal that to us, I'm not going to lose my faith in Him because of that. But this world that we live in, I cannot fathom the remotest possibility that we are here by time and chance. I believe science screams that message. Science, the study of the created order. Science, the study of the world around us, whether it's through the telescope, through the microscope. I believe that creation screams the glory of God. And certainly the Scriptures do. From Genesis to Revelation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Amen. The
heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display the work of His hands. O Lord, what a variety of things you have made. In wisdom you've made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. And then we come to ourselves in this beautiful Psalm 139. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. Where did I come from? The question of identity begins with origin. origin from the heart, the hand, an Almighty God, by whom, through whom, for whom all of this exists. Every star in space, every galaxy, every atom in the human body, and even its tinier parts. But that's not the only part of the question of where did I come from, and identity is not only ultimate origin. We also have this tremendous curiosity about ancestry, because that's part of our unique story. About a week ago, Reba came across an offer of a 2-week free trial on Ancestry.com. Hasn't cost us any money yet. Cost a lot of time. But boy, it's been fun. Just sitting there while I'm doing other things, listening to this new discovery and this discovery. And on Reba's side, Civil War officers on both her mom's and dad's lines. One officer was credited with starting a church in Mississippi, I think it was, or North Carolina. Certainly, you know she's from Texas, so you would expect most of her ancestry to be down south. But interestingly enough, her father's family includes ancestors with names Blackledge and Duffield and Philpott from someplace called Bucks County in Pennsylvania, Bristol and Southampton. Records including someone being baptized and/or married in Christ Church, Philadelphia in the early 1700s. I think there was a Benjamin Franklin who's buried there. That's pretty cool. This Texan has roots all the way up here. Some of you might find this just as fascinating. And one of her ancestors is identified with a village called Highclere in Hampshire, England. I heard one response at least. Do you know anything about Highclere? There's a castle there that's been very prominent in the past several years. Downton Abbey on television was filmed at Highclere Castle and in that village. Who knows? And her family has connections with that location. It's cool, isn't it? Oh, on my side, and we knew some of this before, my ancestors include Alexander, the son of Emmanuel, the born de Baliles, governors for a brief time of Nova Scotia, Canada. That's not all it sounds like. I mean, they didn't do real well, and there were a lot of lawsuits and a lot of other stuff. But the more important part of their story is that their descendants were involved in the expulsion of French Acadians from Nova Scotia in 1755 and the following several years. Many of those descendants from French Acadians in Nova Scotia eventually made their way down to Louisiana and formed today's Cajun population. So my unique ancestors from that deportation, expulsion, found hospitality in Baltimore and eventually settled in Virginia. But who knew how close I came to growing up Reba's next state neighbor in the South? I could have been among the Cajuns in Louisiana just across the border from her home. My ancestry also includes the name Adams from England and Elgin from Scotland. You know, there's a whole line of the Earls of Elgin, whose lineage traces back to Robert the Bruce, Scottish king and hero of Braveheart fame. We haven't for sure established a connection there, but Elgins from Scotland, it could be. Well, that's pretty cool. But here's the question. What difference would it make? Would I hold my head a little higher? Perhaps. Would I find that insults and criticisms would roll off me like water off a duck's back? Oh, I don't care what you think. I'm related to Robert the Bruce, maybe. Would I look for opportunities to let people know? You know, the opposite can happen too. Reba had always heard that one of her ancestors, by the last name of Hatch, fled to Texas from Mississippi because he killed a man and subsequently changed his name from Hatch to Hatchell to avoid notice. If I was going to change my name, I'd change it a little bit more significantly than that. But hey, that story appears to be false. But what if it were true? That have the same or the opposite impact of embarrassment and shame, and instead of something to try to live up to, something to try to overcome. What about my many-great-grandfather who left his family in Virginia planning to return in 2 years when the statute of limitations expired of his delinquent moonshining taxes? True story. Except that he never returned. It's not a story I'm real proud about. Generations later, the Virginia Baliles family would discover a new Baliles family in Arkansas, along with the grave of my missing great-great-grandfather. Many great-grandfathers who left home and kept going and started a new family in Arkansas. See, ancestry is a double-edged sword. It's not unique to our stories. You read the genealogies in the Bible lately? Yeah, I know. I was just doing that last night, as a matter of fact, right? Abraham, King David. There's some stories to live up to, right? You know, in the ancestry of Christ, there's a lot of failure there too.
Amen.
David sinned with Bathsheba. Different people who involved in different ways, people, fallen people, and even people whom God used. That you just said, no, that's gonna taint the line. And that God used them anyhow, and through their line came the one who would be God among us, who would save us. I don't know what your ancestry contains, but whether it's stories that make you want to live up to something, or whether it's stories that make you want to overcome something, I want to encourage you to take it with a grain of salt, to not make too much of it either way, but to focus instead on what God offers us in terms of a new ancestry. Brian read for us from John chapter 1, a chapter that starts like the book of Genesis. In the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God. The Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through Him, and nothing was created except through Him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and His life brought life to everyone. That Word is talking about God's Son, Jesus Christ.
Amen.
He came into the very world He created, though the world didn't recognize Him. He came to His own people, and even they rejected Him. But here's the key verse for ancestry. But to all who believed Him and accepted Him, He gave the right to become children of God. They are reborn, not with a physical birth resulting from human passion or plan, but a birth that comes from God. You and I have the power to change our ancestry. The only one that really matters is to be a child of God through faith in His Son, Jesus Christ. Talking about reason to hold your head up high. Not saying I'm something all that special, but boy, I've got ancestry. Let me tell you about my father. That can change everything. It humbles us when we're proud of what our human ancestors did. It lifts us up when we're embarrassed by what our human ancestors did. You say, yeah, but does that really count? Oh, absolutely it counts. I would suggest by way of illustration that a naturalized citizen of this country has as much right to the ancestry, to the heritage of our country as any of us who were born here. And I would argue that not only legally, but I would argue to say once someone has made that commitment and done what it takes to become part of us, they are entitled to claim that heritage as their own. Of course, the heritage isn't all good. There are things where we should be embarrassed and ashamed about within our nation's story as well. And I would say they also have just as much responsibility to share that embarrassment and that shame and to rise above it and to help all of us together make sure that we never do that again, whatever it may have been. As we come into the family of God, we inherit a new ancestry, a new heritage. You don't have to go to Ancestry.com. Here's a whole lot of it. But this is only the beginning. And there's some nearly 2,000 years of family line in the story of the church.
Amen.
Get to know your family. There are a lot of heroes there. There are a lot of people also with feet of clay who messed up. There are times in the history of the church that we have things that we should be ashamed and embarrassed that our forefathers did. And even though we weren't back there at the time, we can still share the responsibility to make sure never again. And that becomes part of our story and part of our identity. There's one more category that we don't have time to develop here this morning, but just want to acknowledge it, that another part of identity is not just origin, it's not just ancestry, but it's experience. When we talk about the question of where we've come from, our experiences do shape us, good and bad, wealth or poverty, love or rejection, affirmation or abuse, opportunity or hopelessness, support or isolation. That's part of where we've come from too, and that helps to create our identity. But that too can be redeemed. Like our ancestry, we find that, again in John chapter 1, that God gives us the right to become His child, and that is our core identity. And we are reborn. And it tells us then in the very next verse that the Word became human and made His home among us. He was full of, King James or some translations, grace and truth. New Living Translation, He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness. And I want to suggest that if you have hurtful things in your past that have helped to shape your identity, we need to work together to let God's love, unfailing love, and faithfulness touch those deepest parts of us and make us new. Redeem those parts of our heritage, those parts of our experience. And we need to seek out from this day forward new opportunities, new connections, new Christ-honoring, life-shaping experiences where we can choose them for ourselves. That by the choices we make, the people we connect with, the things that we pursue, that we allow into our lives, by the choices we make, that those choices then can help shape us into the future. And God can use those to remake us, to heal us, to use us to be a blessing in this world to other people. Boy, it's a lot. A lot in answer to a simple question: where did I come from? But unlike Joey, I hope you're not sorry you asked. Oh, you didn't ask exactly. I understand that. I asked for you. Whether it's origin, whether it's ancestry, whether it's experience, our identity ultimately comes back to the God who created us. The God who recreates us. The God who invites us into his family and wants to be at work in our lives, to heal the broken places, to strengthen, to use us in this world for his glory and for the good of others.